All right, we got a great interview for you guys today. Thomas Frank. So you know his book, What's the Matter with Kansas? He's got a new book out, Listen, Liberal. I already love it. Or Whatever Happened to the Party of the People. I love that as well. Thomas, great to have you here.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
All right, so now you've written many books, and What's the Matter with Kansas was a giant hit because it talked about the problems of conservatives. Now, when you talk about the problems of liberals, is that as well received?
No. The short answer is no. But you know, look, my own opinion. This is a book that is just as good as that. In fact, it builds on the last chapter of What's the Matter with Kansas, and it's kind of a sequel. So it's the question is why do you know? The question that we're all wondering about all the time: how do so many people vote for this this sort of political arrangement that hurts them? Mm-hmm. And the What's the Matter with Kansas talked about the culture wars and that sort of thing. But this one talks about how the Democratic Party walked away from those people.
Okay, so there's a lot to talk about there, especially as we record this a week before the election between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. So first off, you claim the Democratic Party used to be for the people. Now, everybody in Washington will say, what do you mean used to be? Of course the Democratic Party's for it. That's nonsense. We'll get to that in a second. But let's go back in time a little bit. Were they for the people at some point?
Okay, so this is you're touching on one of the questions that I had to resolve before I started writing the book. I said to my friends, I'm writing a book about where the Democratic Party went wrong, and they would go, man, where are you going to start? Mm-hmm. Right? So I chose to start in the late 60s, early 70s. And so that means ignoring a lot of the earlier history. But yeah, you could make the argument that they've been screwed up for a long, long, long time. But for my purposes, I started in the early 70s.
Yeah, so I have argued on the show that the Democratic Party actually was for the people. I agree with your thesis. I think that before money swamped politics, that there was a ton of success for progressives. Yeah. Ralph Nader got Richard Nixon to pass the EPA and OSHA, et cetera.
I'm sorry, I need to stop interrupting. I need to learn that lesson. But if you go back far enough, I mean, Franklin Roosevelt was outspent by the Republicans in these massive ways all the time. William Jennings Bryan was outspent, 20-1, things like this. It didn't matter because they had a different model, a different way of reaching the presidency. I mean, you see that again with Bernie Sanders, but your mainstream Democrats, the Clinton wing of the Democratic Party, their assumption is, no, we have to raise as much money as the Republicans or else we don't have a chance. But in the old days, they knew there was a different route.
Yeah, and now we have what I call the Barney Frank rule. When talking to one of our reporters on TYT Politics, Barney Frank said, what do you want us to do? Get none of the money from the banks instead of 20%?
Yeah.
And the answer is yes, because getting 20% of the money from big donors is a perpetually losing strategy.
Yeah. And it's not like the old system that they used to have, it wasn't like they were bankrupt. I mean, you remember organized labor used to, even in the dark period before they learned how to love Wall Street, mm-hmm. they got the money from organized labor, and that they were no slouches back in those days. I mean, we're talking a long time ago here, mm-hmm. The 50s, the 60s, the 70s, but it wasn't like they were starving for money, okay? I mean, mm-hmm. they didn't have as much as the Republicans. But mm-hmm. But that's the way it worked in this country. Both parties don't have to compete in the exact same way by the exact same model.
But they found a way to win anyway, and nowadays
But they love the way they win now because it's not only do they win, but they also enjoy all the things that go with it.
The spoils of
yes.
of their booty, if you will.
Yeah,
a funny way of putting it. Okay, so let's talk about the current Democratic Party and the spoils that they get. So first, as we transition, where did they start to go wrong and why?
So, I mean, first you have to, look at who they are today and how did they get to this place? You look at the ways that they failed. I mean, they're very good at certain things, but then they fail at other things. Where did that start? And for my purposes, it starts with, in the late 60s and early 70s, they come out of the election of 68. They look at it as a disaster, even though by our modern standards, that looks like a close election. Mm-hmm. Hubert Humphrey did pretty all right, but he lost to Nixon. Mm-hmm. And they decided to do some soul searching after that. They set up a commission to reorganize the Democratic Party. And that commission essentially decided to remove organized labor from its structural position in the Democratic Party. That's what they decided to do. And instead to chase after a different demographic. So the Democrats were not going to be the party of working people anymore. Yes, they still wanted their votes and they wanted their money and that sort of thing. But their main demographic was going to be a different group. And the phrase they used at the time was the suburban liberals, but what we would now call like white-collar, affluent professionals, okay? And this was the big shift that they made in the early 70s. And you can understand why they did it. You go back and look at the time and, the Vietnam War was going. Organized labor didn't look that attractive back in those days. And so you can understand why they made this move. But, you come up to our present time and this is a disaster. This is, once you throw working people under the bus, you're setting the table for the situation that we're in now, inequality, the middle class coming apart. Now, they didn't see that in 1972, but...
Yeah. So right now, to what degree have they abandoned the working class?
Well, NAFTA. This is a knife in the back, to working people into their organizations. And... you go right down the list, but their courtship of Wall Street, their failure to get tough with Wall Street. By the way, we're here in California. This is one of the epicenters of the housing bubble and the aftermath. If you lied on a mortgage application 10 years ago or whatever, the FBI is knocking at your door right now. They're cracking down on that. But if you were the guy on the other side of the table packaging up those fraudulent mortgages and selling them off to retirees in Germany or something like that, nothing ever happened to you. And it's a different standard for, basically, long story short, Wall Street got a huge bailout, okay, under Republicans and Democrats both, and average Americans got next to nothing, right? We got no bailout, and middle class people in this country still, by and large, think the recession is still going, even though on paper the economy looks really good right now. It looks like it's going like crazy.
So I want to get back to the corruption in a second, but let's talk about that last thing you just mentioned there. Why does it feel like the recession is still going if on paper it appears that unemployment is down and all those different economic factors seem to be up?
I think people understand or have come to understand during the last downturn, the financial crisis and the recession, when they saw Wall Street get bailed out and looked at their own situation that's has been in a chronic long-term downward trajectory for decades. They understand that something structural has changed and that their way of life, that sort of middle-class way of life that they grew up expecting to have, that is not available to them anymore, and that's not coming back. And there is a desperation out there in this country, and you've seen it.
Yeah, I think that it's the Walmart economy. Yeah, you've got jobs.
Yes, exactly.
But you're working at Walmart, and you don't have any. They're lacking the self-respect they used to have. It used to be okay to work on the assembly line, and it was a good job, and it was a man's job, and you worked hard. And I don't mean that in any way that women. No,
I know exactly
it.
what you mean.
Right.
And think about that. There's two things I want to bring up about that. Those jobs are gone now or are disappearing. And when you talk about that to Democrats, you know what they always say? Well, the problem is you. You didn't go to college. You just went to high school. How can you expect to have a good job that pays good money? Or maybe you did go to college, but you studied the wrong thing. You didn't study a STEM degree. Or maybe you did study a STEM degree, but you went to the wrong school. There's always some way of pushing it back onto the individual using education. It always goes back to education. It's like, no, we are human beings. We have a right to make a claim to a middle-class livelihood. And I want to point something else out to you. The gig economy. Were you at the Democratic convention?
Yeah.
I saw you at the Republican, but at the Democratic convention. So, Hillary Clinton talked about the Democratic Party being the party of working people. And then all the delegates go out and are supposed to take Ubers home. You remember this? Mm-hmm, and it's like, how can that be? This is such a blunt contradiction. These are the people who are rewriting the social contract of this country.
Let alone on a macro scale, that the fact that the convention was paid for by giant donors.
Right.
And that Hillary Clinton lifted the ban on lobbyists.
And so she's giving these wonderful speeches, and there were many good speeches at the Democratic Convention, wonderful speeches. And then you look up at the skyboxes, and it's all the Wall Street guys.
Yep.
And then out in the parking lot, the Uber tent. They had a special deal with Uber to ferry the delegates back and forth.
Of course they did, because one of the largest donor base, if not the largest at this point for the Democratic Party, is Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
So
what unites all these things? This is the question of Listen Liberal. Is it just the money, or is there something deeper? And these are intelligent humans. They have to be rationalizing it in some way. And so what I decided is there is something deeper. That all of these things come together. And if you remember what I was saying about the 70s, where they reached out to the professional class, that's still where they are today. And they look at these industries and they're like, yes, the creative class, right? The knowledge industries. So they look at these guys on Wall Street and they're like, it's financial innovation, Yes,
okay.
I'm quite serious though.
No, I know.
And they admire these guys and they say, that's us. The guys at the top of the Treasury Department with their fancy degrees and everything. And they look at the guys at J.P. Morgan or Blackstone or whatever, and they're like, these are our classmates. Yep. I mean that in both senses of the word.
It's literally, yes, absolutely. Look, anytime somebody's talking about financial innovation, grab your wallet and run. Because they're about to innovate you out of a job, an economy, and all your money. So now...
But Silicon Valley is the same. Big Pharma is the same. They look at these things, these are the creative industries, the knowledge industries. These are our people. And so what I'm saying, and this is the fundamental thing, and by the way, this is not me trying to read between the lines or anything. This is in their literature, in Democratic Party magazines, books written by their big theorists. They identify with the winners, the new economy winners, not with working people, with the winners. And that's the big shift in the last 40 years.
I knew I was going to get something great out of this interview. So I think as you were explaining the different industries there, my take on it is that Silicon Valley has not fully transitioned to corruption yet, that they are halfway home, right? Halfway in both senses, that maybe there's some prayer, and I like to be optimistic and positive, that we could pull them back. And they're also halfway to full corruption. And when you get that, and you've got the energy companies, the pharmaceutical companies, the banks, and if you add Silicon Valley, it's over. It's over. Then the moneyed interests are going to completely take over in this system. We're going to be absolutely screwed. But I actually think the Valley does value the right kind of innovation as well.
Oh, of course. No, absolutely. And the stuff they've done is miraculous,
Right.
It's changed our lives. The thing is that you can't just allow these things to run without any kind of oversight. One of the examples that I always talk about is antitrust. I mean, people at Google, at Amazon, at a bunch of these other companies have monopoly dreams far beyond the Rockefellers, far beyond the Vanderbilts, the sort of 19th century, robber barons. We're living in a different age, and that the Justice Department doesn't look into it, they don't investigate it. Not only do they not do that, I mean, you look at a guy like Eric Schmidt, the CEO of Google, who appears all the time, by the way, in Listen Liberal. So I'm doing the research for Listen Liberal, and this guy just keeps popping up. He's all over the place. He's like the Where's Waldo of the Democratic Party, right? Here he is at a Hillary Clinton speech in the Netherlands. Here's Obama's first speech after he's elected president, his big economic address, and there's Eric Schmidt on the stage. It's like, what's going on? Why is this guy always there? And
yeah, well, part of the reason is, from my reading of it, is that in 2012, the bankers said, okay, we're done with Obama. He tweaked us. How dare he tweak us while giving us $7 trillion from the Fed, et cetera, right? So then Obama had to get a new base of donors, and there's two bases that he went to. One was the LGBT community, who stepped up large for him. And then all of a sudden, his position on gay marriage evolved. Funny how that works. Okay, and then number two was...
You're more cynical than me.
Oh, no. Full boat. Okay, it's not a matter of cynicism. As I just told you,
I'm just giving you a hard time.
I know. I'm optimistic, but I'm also keep it real on the facts. And the facts are right there in front of anyone who wants to see them. Yeah. President Obama claims to be against gay marriage. 1/4 of his top bundlers are gay Americans in 2012. Boom, he immediately switches over and says, all of a sudden I'm for gay marriage. Now, I believe that President Obama was in his mind actually for gay marriage all along. But as okay, I'll take out the adjective, as a politician, right? And he lied. He lied about his position before. He lied about why he changed his position. There was no moral evolving there.
Yeah.
It didn't take someone in the year 2011, 2012, 2013, that goes for Obama and Hillary Clinton, to realize that gay marriage is the correct moral position and not that equality is the correct position in America.
Yeah.
No, they're politicians. It's about the money. But getting back to the Valley, they desperately needed the Valley, the Democratic Party did, once the bankers started leaving.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why Eric Schmidt winds up everywhere, because he's an enormous part of that infrastructure.
Yeah, but it's also this that they fit into the Democratic Party ideology. It's an industry that they find it easy to reach out to, but you're exactly right in that sense. It is the new Wall Street. I mean, this is the coming Wall Street.
Yeah.
I mean, in more than just in a donor sense, in an economic sense, And Wall Street also had Mitt Romney that they could. He was one of their own. They felt good about it. So the way I look at it, there's two different hierarchies in American society. Okay, there's more than two, but there's two that matter for political purposes. And you have the hierarchy of money, hierarchy of business, the Koch brothers, Mitt Romney, that sort of thing. And that's the Republican Party. That's, pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, working your way up in the business world, that kind of thing. And then there's a different hierarchy in American life, and that's the hierarchy of status that derives from education and professional achievement. And these people are Democrats. And so if you look at it that way, then some of these industries are up for grabs. So Wall Street appeals to both, and they give to both. Well, not this year, right? Mm-hmm. But you can see an argument from both sides. Silicon Valley, same deal. Big Pharma, same deal. But then, other people are just completely left in the cold. And then a lot of us, people like you and me, you remember that phrase from the Clinton era? They have nowhere else to go.
Yeah.
And that's what happens to us, right? We just
right.
get to fit in however we can.
So I want to get to that in 1 second because I noticed that you were missing. Okay. Yeah. And I wondered what happened to Thomas Frank. He used to be on TV all the time back when he was criticizing the Republican Party. Now I see you were criticizing the Democratic Party, and all of a sudden you got nowhere else left to go. So
yeah. Well, here I am.
Here you are, and that makes sense, and that's why we call this Rebel Headquarters. But before I get there, though, I wanted to go back to the issue of corruption for one more second. Speaking of Republicans and Democrats. So it drives me crazy that the Republican Party doesn't acknowledge, and by that the voters. Of course, the party officials on both sides are nearly hopeless, right? But the voters, they say, oh, the government is corrupt, the government is corrupt. Yeah. And the politicians are corrupted. Okay, agreed, no problem, deal, right? Then I ask, okay, who corrupted them? And so there, the Republican voters are like, no, what do you mean? What do you mean? Yeah, big business corrupted them.
Yes.
You want to say labor? Okay, fine, labor.
Yeah.
Whoever put money into politics, they corrupted them, and they did it for profit motive. Of course they did.
Yeah.
Of course they did.
Of course. Yeah.
And so it drives me crazy that the Republican voters can't recognize that, but I think they will. I think they're going to come around to that.
Interesting thing that Trump said, crazy thing that Trump said in the third debate. And Trump's signature issue is trade, and this is what he's been hitting, and Hillary Clinton, alone among the Democratic candidates, is uniquely vulnerable to that. The about NAFTA and the TPP and all this. And Trump said on his signature issue that he's supposed to know more about than anything else. He said, what we need to do on trade to solve this problem, we've got all these great business minds in America. We need to let them write our trade deals.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Well, that's exactly what the TPP is.
I know, exactly.
He's such a moron.
Yeah.
He's so stupid.
I know.
Okay, so, all right. Now, turning to the Democratic Party, when you talk about the corrupted and the corruptors, et cetera, the Democratic Party goes, no, I don't see any corruption.
Yeah.
I won't even acknowledge that anything is corrupt.
Yeah.
And so they find great offense at that. Mm-hmm. If you say, hey, look, if you take $3 billion, as the Clintons have, in campaign donations, personal money, Clinton Foundation, et cetera, that perhaps somebody wants something back for the $3 billion. They're like, how dare you? No, humans are naturally awesome, decent people.
But the Clinton found, even when I was writing Listen Liberal, it was clear that was that's the Achilles heel of this. Of the Clintons, the Clinton Foundation. Now, I didn't do I went at it in a different angle, and people will have to read the book to see where I went to a Clinton Foundation gathering, and I had some amusing things to say about it. Hillary Clinton was presiding over this gathering, by the way. But this is really bad. All of these scandals. This stuff is no joke. But what's fascinating about it is that this was known. Well before any the primaries were over, the Democrats insisted it had to be her. They wanted Hillary Clinton, and they were not going to take no for an answer. And they wouldn't. Remember Obama talked Joe Biden out of running, right? It couldn't be him. Had to be her.
Yep.
And they did everything in their power to defeat Bernie Sanders. It couldn't be him. It had to be her. And now look what's happened.
That's because it's not Ben. My co-host says that it's because they were wrong. And so it's good to acknowledge that the establishment was wrong. But it wasn't that they were wrong, if you ask me. It's that they are the party of corruption.
Well, they were determined to do it this way.
That's right.
If Hillary wins, they all move up a notch in Washington.
Exactly.
And that's all that really matters to them. So now I'm getting too cynical. I shouldn't say that's all that matters. It's an important consideration for these guys.
But okay, so that leads us to how you're in the wilderness and you've joined our merry lot here. Okay? Ideologically, right?
Yeah.
So you're appearing on TV all the time when you're doing What's the Matter with Kansas, and it's a great book, and it talks about what's wrong with the Republican voters, and everybody should read it. And it was celebrated for a good reason.
I'm proud of it. It's a good book.
Yeah, and you're one of the best writers out there. Harper's Magazine, Guardian, Le Monde, Book Forum, Financial Times, wonderful stuff. And then all of a sudden, you're off of people's radars. It looked to me as if it was because you were talking about the Democratic Party now.
Yeah, well, it was like throwing a switch. So after the 2012 election, I wrote 3 books criticizing the conservative movement. And after 3 books, I was like, this is not a challenge anymore. This is, the thrill is gone. And look who's sitting in the White House. It's Barack Obama. And we'll look at all the dreams that we have about Barack Obama and all the hopes that we've projected onto him. Hope. Right? And look at what he's actually done. I mean, let's take a look at that. And so I started writing about that instead. This is after the 2012 election. And, after he's beaten Mitt Romney soundly, okay? And I went to a dinner party and I heard someone talking about the coalition of the ascendant and how Democrats were going to win every presidential election from here on out. It was mathematically determined. This real certainty that they have in Washington,
Yep.
This is the party of the executive branch. They've got a lock on it, they think. Why am I not, looking more carefully at these guys, right? So I started doing that. And next thing you know, I'm not on TV anymore. And it's not a conspiracy or anything. It's just what I was saying was suddenly of no interest. I have a feeling you've experienced the exact same thing.
I think I know how that feels. Yeah, and so rarely is it ever conspiratorial where people will gather in a room and they say, okay, now everybody, let's all support the Democratic Party, et cetera. It's not like that. But there is a culture, and there is...
You're about there. It's class. It's a class that they are from the same class as the one I was describing earlier, white-collar professionals, the people at the top of journalism. Do you ever look at of course you do, the New York Times op-ed page, the Washington Post op-ed page? The rest of the country cannot get excited about Hillary Clinton. They're probably going to vote for her because they're scared of Trump, but they can't get excited about her. But these people are absolutely head over heels in love with Hillary Clinton.
Yes, they are.
She's the greatest thing in the world. Why is that? She's one of them, not just in a political sense, an ideological sense, in a class sense. It's solidarity. It's the basic operation of social class.
That's why they have such great disdain for us. They really do. They can't stand us.
Yeah, or Bernie Sanders. Jesus, the way they reacted to this guy. It was like an allergy. It was like, who is this man? He was talking like Harry Truman or something. It's like they thought that was dead and gone and put away in a box and they'd never have to see that again. And here he comes.
Yeah.
And
so when we point out that Hillary Clinton is not loved by this country, she isn't. It is a fact.
Well, but people might vote for her, but I voted for her, by the way. I went or did early voting in Maryland. So, don't get me wrong. I voted for her.
Yeah.
I hope she wins.
So both sides.
But I'm not psyched about it.
Yeah, no, both sides drive me crazy because it is a fact that she's the second least popular candidate for president in U.S. history, as long as we have had polling. it is also a fact that she's the luckiest woman alive in this context because she's running against the least popular candidate we've ever had in American history, and all for good reason. So now the Democrats say it's good reason that people really hate Trump, and I agree. I think he's a monster, and I think he's incompetent, and he's a buffoon, and all these reasons why I will vote against him, okay? Yeah. But at the same time, that doesn't make your problems go away. No. It doesn't mean that Hillary Clinton is actually loved, but I'm lying about it and I'm tricking people. But I'm reporting the facts.
You're exactly right, but I would go one step further that Hillary Clinton is a candidate of complacency and a candidate of the status quo and of things staying the same. And Republican Congress is going to remain, and she's going to continue the policies of the Obama administration, and every trajectory that we're on now is going to continue. Now, there is a chance that the economy is going to suddenly start going like crazy, and everybody will recover and wages will start growing, and the 30-year downward trajectory will be snapped, and she will be a great hero. But I doubt that will happen. I think things will continue, and 4 years from now, as the Democrats continue to ignore what's happening to working class people in this country and saying, well, you should have gone to college, or whatever it is, always talking about, it's you and your lousy education that did it. Mm-hmm. 4 years from now, you're going to get a Trump who's not so stupid.
That's exactly
You're
right.
going to get a Trump that knows you don't run for president by insulting every ethnic group in the country. That plays the game right, but with the same issues, and guess what?
Yeah. And so my plan is beat them both, just one at a time. Okay, let's make sure we don't slip into fascism now, and then let's go knock the status quo down. And so, that's why the Hillary team, the Democratic Party, knows that is our intent. That is why they can't stand us. They think, no, everything's going to be fine. Yeah. If it wasn't for you rabble-rousers, all of this would have worked out fine, right? No, things are not going to be fine. You've totally pulverized the middle class in this country. You are the party of the status quo. Yeah. And so just closing your eyes and going, no, I bet another Trump won't come by is not the right answer. The right answer is to be populist from the left so that the populists on the right don't win, because their populism is fake.
Well, just look at what's facing the country and do something about it. It's just the answer is the simplest thing in the world. Lyndon Johnson would have known what to do in this situation. Harry Truman, Franklin Roosevelt, Democrats of old would have. I mean, these guys had a lot of problems. Don't get me wrong, but they would have taken one look at what's going on in this country and be like, yeah, we need to rebuild the middle class. We need to we need to do this, 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 and this. And our modern Democrats are, none of it. None of it.
So last couple of things here is.
By the way, I wanted to point out in the WikiLeaks. I mean, there are so many great things in the WikiLeaks dump about Podesta, but one of them was from 2015, and it was an internal campaign document. And one of the Clinton team was saying to another one of the Clinton team, "It frightens me that our only strategy for victory is let's hope Trump gets the nomination."
And here we are.
And here we are, and it's working out for them, but that's not a strategy.
And by the way, maybe. Today there's a poll out where he's up by 1. Yeah. So they're hanging on by their fingernails and think that they're on top of the world. They're so blinded. Yeah. Just quick question before, because the WikiLeaks is what I want to get to last, because he wrote some really interesting stuff about that. But do you ever get a sense from your old friends in that class of folks in the media or even in the political parties, hey, Thomas, that wasn't cool. You're not a team player. That wasn't cool, right? Do you get that sense or vibe at all, or no?
Yes, but not in this country. They're too polite, okay? And they also knew that I have always been critical of Democrats. I never wrote a whole book about Democrats, but I'm always critical of them. But weirdly, when I went to England, just a little while ago, the English, I had never encountered this before. Maybe you have, but they expect that every newspaper person, every journalist is really just a propagandist. And so our job is to propagandize for one party or the other. And they could see that I wasn't doing that. I wasn't being a team player. Mm-hmm. And they were harshly critical of that. And that's never been I am on the left, but I'm not I'm
Right.
not a propagandist, right? I'm an independent person. I have a critical faculty,
But it's not just in the UK. Here, I guess they're too savvy to say it out loud, except unless you're Phil Griffin, who runs MSNBC, who just flat out told me. But outside of that, they're too savvy to say it. But they have the same expectation.
Yeah.
They keep saying, why won't you get in line, right?
Yeah.
Like, hey, you got to know which side you're on.
But that's exactly right. And what you see is that the media, and it's not a conspiracy, and it's not liberal media bias or something like that, but they have embraced the two-party system, internalized the two-party system. So it's okay to criticize Republicans from the left, which I used to do,
Right.
and it's okay to criticize Democrats from the right, which they do on Fox News.
Yep.
But it's not okay to criticize Democrats from the left. That's that
right.
does not work, mentally.
That's when the system ejects you,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And we're done. Okay. So now finally on WikiLeaks. So you wrote about how everybody's obsessed with the FBI cache of emails, et cetera. But the real deal's in the Podesta emails, which I couldn't agree with more. You've got, like in 2008, Froman from Citigroup hands Barack Obama his entire cabinet. It's a guy, an executive at Citigroup says, here are the guys you'll pick.
Yeah.
And that's almost exactly the people that Obama picks. And then you've got Teneo, this company, that is secretly arranging every deal for the Clinton Foundation and the private speeches where they actually pocket the money the Clintons do.
Yes.
And then what does the press talk about? In that same Doug Band email, which I'm going to talk about today, where Doug Band says, this isn't about charity. He says it. He says this is about serious business.
And he uses the phrase
right?
Clinton Incorporated.
Right. They say at the end, he says Chelsea Clinton's a spoiled brat.
Yeah.
The only thing the press talked about is, something
of course.
personal.
Right. Yeah.
He called her a spoiled brat. I'm like, look at the rest of the email.
Yeah, it's shocking. It's unbelievable. But do you remember? So I got the idea. This is my column in The Guardian. It's in yesterday's paper. But when the Enron emails came out, you remember those days. Mm-hmm. Some sociologist somewhere did linked them all up, who wrote to who, and they did a big graphic pattern so you could chart who all the people were in the Enron universe. And I started thinking, what would that look like if you did that with Podesta? And there's this huge Wall Street contingent. So the emails you mentioned where a guy at Citibank is choosing President Obama's cabinet before Obama's even elected, while the rest of us are all going to those rallies, right? Mm-hmm. 200,000 people in Kansas City or whatever, and he's choosing his cabinet. And we wonder why Citibank, the greatest zombie bank of them all, never got put out of business in the financial crisis. And there's the answer. But the other people on the email chain, it's all people in venture capital and stuff like that. They were choosing Obama's cabinet. It blows the mind. But then there's all these guys in Silicon Valley, right? And then you have all these people, these sort of courtiers coming to Podesta. This is one of the weirder things in the emails. All the people sending their resumes to Podesta are the resumes of their children, asking for jobs in D.C. with the campaign, with the Clinton Foundation, and people from the foundation moving into the State Department or going into becoming, running a startup and getting private equity from somewhere, some venture capital from somewhere. And it's like, it is creepy. This is the establishment talking to itself. And we can see it all happening. Yeah. And it's like they love to talk about meritocracy. The Democrats love the idea of meritocracy. You got a good grade, you did well on your SATs, the world is your oyster.
Right.
And we now can see, you went to Harvard, you went to Yale, you went to Georgetown, that's a prerequisite. But what you really have to know is John Podesta's contact information.
Yep. And you see it all over the emails. You want to know the real email scandal? Read John Podesta's emails, and it tells you exactly how the establishment works, and it ain't pretty. And guess what? There's one set of folks who are not invited to the party. You. Okay? Because you don't have Podesta's email, and you don't have his contacts, and you never gave them money. If you don't give money to the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, they don't have your interests in mind. And when Thomas Frank says that, and I say that, we become persona non gratas with the insiders. Well, I couldn't be prouder of it, and I love your books and I love your work, and thank you for joining us, Thomas.
Man, it was my pleasure. It was my pleasure. It was great to see you again, by the way.
Absolutely. Good to see you.